Greetings, this is Tom with Buncombe Shinola. You know, ever since Roger Corman's death in May, I've been pondering a lot his impact on me. I mean, his films straight up changed my life, and his aesthetic helped shape my outlook. And the prodigies he championed eventually became my heroes. And I thought it would be cool, you know, as a little bit of a tribute to list the 10 favorite films that are Roger Corman related. I'm sure some will object and quibble over some of my omissions. For instance, in this list you will find no juvenile delinquent movies. You will find no women's in prison movies. You will find no biker movies. You will find no car chase movies from the 70s. While these are all genres I have affection for, and certainly there are iconic sequences peppered throughout, I find that typically if you break them down film to film, many of these have considerable flaws that are pretty tough to overlook. As well, you will not find any of Corman's Vincent Price projects. Truth of the matter is that I realize that it's only Corman and Edgar Allan Poe adjacent peripherally, but my favorite out of all those is The Conqueror Worm or The Witchfinder General, which I know only barely counts, and I will probably talk about that movie in another video in the future. This is not necessarily what I would call Roger Corman's best films, although some of them are included, I would say. These are simply ones that are personal favorites that I hold closest to my heart. I also wanted to point out a secondary list of really amazing films that I don't think people realize have a Roger Corman connection, and that list of surprises will appear at the end of this video. So here we go, my top 10 favorite Roger Corman movies. Number 10, Bloodbath, also known as Track of the Vampire. This is a really good example of Roger Corman's low-budget utilitarian, well, it's basically 2 or 3 films cobbled together with some scenes added by Corman's chosen director. It's just the sort of thing that should not work, yet it does. It's got a very interesting, bizarre vampire gothic tale mixed in with some amazing showcases for an extremely attractive female cast, and all of the cast is really interesting. Sid Haig is in there. It's just exactly what should not work, but it does. It's a highly entertaining movie, and there's even a dream sequence that borders on the Dali-esque. Definitely an underdog favorite of mine from his productions. Number 9, Humanoids from the Deep. This features Roger Corman retooling his sort of B-movie creature aesthetic for 80s tastes. Like Track of the Vampire, it's at least partially directed by a woman. Nonetheless, there are astounding scenes of, well, in this movie you not only get gill men forcing themselves upon virtually every bikini-clad character in the cast, you also get social commentary about racism, about the ecology, and about the heartless corporate nature of American settler imperialism into the native lands, and that's certainly surprising. But above all else, it's just a fun, crazy vehicle with some tasty roles for old-timers Vic Morrow and Doug McClure. You may remember him from such Simpsons parodies as Give My Remains to Broadway and The Decapitation of Larry Leadfoot. Number 8, It Conquered the World, one of Corman's classic 50s sci-fi monster flicks. This one really overachieves in so many ways. The cast is amazing. You got your Peter Graves, you got your Lee Van Cleef, you got your Beverly Garland, you got your Dick Miller. The storytelling and dialogue is surprisingly tight, and everyone's just bringing so much more than is necessary to this, and this low-rent cousin to Invasion of the Body Snatchers congeals into a perfect paranoid plate, one of Corman's sturdiest productions, enough for it to have been remade more than once. Number 7, Little Shop of Horrors. Perhaps Roger Corman's greatest triumph of efficient economy. hokey, rushed, amateurish, stagey, certainly, but somehow an absurd joy from start to finish. A bit bewildering that it could influence a off-Broadway musical and filmed remake, which probably loom larger in popularity at this point. But for me, my heart will always go with the softcore porn remake, Please Don't Eat My Mother, which I'll probably make a video about at some point here. And of course, the film, which was wrapped up quickly enough in order to facilitate the production of Little Shop of Horrors, is our next entry, number 6, Bucket of Blood. Where do I start with the Bucket of Blood? It is just so many disparate elements coming together so much more tightly than they should. Very macabre comedy, a perfect beatnik satire, some really far ahead thinking commentary on not just the nature of artistic expression, but also the desire for acceptance and fandom. And there's also some really humorous commentary on future health food lunacy. Some really great visual choices in Corman's direction elevate what should have been a throwaway comedy that I think finally is the equal to or superior to the better-known Little Shop of Horrors, which features most of the same cast and crew. Number 5, Attack of the Giant Leeches. Yet another collaboration with his brother Gene Corman. This creature feature just oozes with swampy southern sweaty slime. Amazing cast again. Yvette Vickers, tragic starlet, puts in an unforgettable performance, appearing in some of the same outfits that she wears in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. And also featuring one of my personal B-movie heroes, Bruno Vasoda. Just unforgettable, one of his biggest roles. Again, the special effects, laughable. The costumes for the giant leeches, ridiculous, but somehow still kind of effective and cool when they pull their victims down underwater to their sub-swamp lair to slowly suck the blood out of them. Whatever your favorite movie is on Earth, I bet I've watched this movie more than that. Just inexplicably entertaining grade Z Corman crap, which I'll watch over and over again. And speaking of troubling southern sleaze, at number 4 we have The Intruder. Famously, this was Corman's attempt at a, quote, message picture, unquote, whose failure steered the director in a less topical direction for the future. With a stunning pre-Star Trek performance by William Shatner, and utilizing the zeitgeist of real ex-Confederate locations, the fable of the cynical grifter rousing the rube rabble of small-town America has only become more prescient in the post-2020 election era. Perhaps some of the items on this list I may speak of Corman's overachievement in disdained lowbrow genres. I am stating The Intruder is 100% a great movie that is absolutely required viewing. Number 3, Death Race 2000. Yeah, I know I said no car race movies, but this is much more a hilarious portrait of a bizarre dystopian future. And the cast is just incredible. I mean, maybe one of the best Roger Corman-related casts in history. You got Sylvester Stallone, David Carradine, Mary Warrenoff, so many others. It's just action-packed, hilarious from start to finish. This 1975 Roger Corman production just seems time-proof, which is probably not what is going to be said for the recent remake. Number 2, Targets. Roger Corman enlisted Peter Bogdanovich to throw together a feature using a couple days' work owed him by Boris Karloff, and also a previous feature made with Boris Karloff by Roger Corman called The Terror. And the result is a dual triumph. Fantastic Hitchcockian true crime thriller mixed in with a meta commentary featuring director Bogdanovich with Karloff musing over the changing role of horror as modern times moved away from Universal's original paradigm. Throughout, the film is unexpectedly rich. On one hand, a love letter to Boris Karloff, not his last movie, but certainly his last triumph. And as this country's weapon-crazed so-called culture has snowballed over the decades, the mass shooter subplot has only grown in power. And this is coming from someone who actually lives in Austin, where the Texas Tower looms over the skyline. And that brings us to number 1. And I'm sure this is not going to be a surprise to anyone who is friends with me or anyone who follows any of my work online. Rock and Roll High School. When I was in school, I was thinking about starting a band with my best friend, and he was just learning some guitar, and I'd already spent some years trying to mimic some Ringo Starr and Kinks-isms and Rolling Stones-isms on drums, but I was starting to get into some punk rock. This is back in one of the days you would go into a video store and rent some movies, and we walked into one and they were showing Rock and Roll High School. I'd seen a little bit of it on late night cable TV years before, but we had a chance to sit on a couch and watch the concert sequence, and my friend spotted quickly that Johnny's approach to rhythm guitar was something that he could replicate right away. He was like, oh, it's just like 2 chords, moved a lot. And soon we were playing, and I can't overstate that this movie changed my life. I mean, everything that the Ramones eventually brought to me, simplicity, directness, the appreciation of the underdog, of the outsider. It didn't just influence my musical taste, it also brought me to Bukowski, Bergman, and Goya. The energy of everything that I wanted to bring to my own expression of myself started that night. And I just literally would not be the person I am today. I don't know what I would have done if Roger Corman had not enlisted Alan Arkish to make Rock and Roll High School. By the way, I have another video on my channel where I talk about this more. I mean, this silly teenage comedy, PG even, unfortunately. And you would wonder how it could carry such weight. But years later, as I opened up my used record store on the day that Joey died, and all of the coolest friends of mine slowly started to walk in to commiserate over shared loss, I reflected on the impact and where it all started. And no joke, it was Rock and Roll High School. And as I began to play in bands myself, and as the other original members of the Ramones shuffled its mortal coil, I felt somehow driven to carry on some fraction of visceral power of approach that they had instilled in me and that Roger Corman had helped introduce me to. So with my eternal gratitude, cheers to you. Wow, man. Getting all choked up there, man. Hope you forgive me. Now, next, a little more quickly, I just want to touch on, I think there's a tendency to always connect Roger Corman with low-budget schlock. What I just wanted to run through a little bit right now is a top 10 of movies that you probably do not associate with Roger Corman. And I think you will be surprised at the caliber of cinema that we'll be talking about here. Number 10, The Wicker Man. Corman was consulted by the director of The Wicker Man as to marketability of his film in America. Corman recommended some cuts, which probably did not help the film's quality much, but that's not what we have to credit him for here. Corman hung on to his full-length work print, and later, when all other prints were lost, it was this copy which the film's restoration was built upon. So, bad advice perhaps, but thankfully what he advised was outshone by what he archived. Number 9, Reservoir Dogs. Quentin Tarantino made certain to include Corman amongst the dedicatees listed for his inaugural classic. Number 8, Philadelphia. Number 7, Silence of the Lambs. Number 6, Godfather Part 2. Roger Corman did not act that much in movies, but certainly his batting average with cameos in Best Picture Oscar winners is pretty staggering. All of these top-notch films, I would say. And he also appeared in the slightly less iconic Apollo 13. He also appeared in the notable Wim Wenders film State of Things. But for anyone aware of the mythology that exists around Roger Corman's penny pinching, perhaps his most delicious brief appearance happens in Joe Dante's werewolf pastiche, The Howling. For 5 through 1 are all cut from the same cloth. Roger Corman's New World Pictures distribution in the 70s surprisingly began a focused effort to distribute prestige foreign films for the American market. And their track record is pretty damn impressive, not just in terms of quality, but also variety of top-tier overseas offerings. Number 5, Fantastic Planet, the extremely surreal sci-fi animated film. Number 4, The Tin Drum, the phantasmagoric historical German psychodrama, was not the only Oscar winner for Best Foreign Film which Corman helmed the distribution of. There was also winners of the award from Kurosawa and Fellini, and quite a few other nominees. Number 3, Fitzcarraldo. Like Werner Herzog's other classic, Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which is one of my absolute favorite films ever. This film is an astonishing achievement which marriages the seemingly insurmountable task portrayed in the story with the seemingly almost insurmountable task of producing the film which tells that story. Through New World's assistance, Corman brought one of the director's greatest works to the widest audience possible. Number 2, The Harder They Come. Bet you didn't know Corman had a hand in the popularization of this classic Jamaican outlaw fable. Not immediately a huge American success upon its initial release, but eventually swelled into huge popularity as a midnight movie. And no doubt assisted in the growing popularity of reggae and ska in this country. And number 1, Cries and Whispers by Ingmar Bergman. Oh, what to say about this film? It is one of the most powerful, evocative treatises on death and loss and mortality and the emotional ties that we all bring to bear with our blood relatives. It is so relentlessly intense that as the main character finally falls, you honestly don't feel as if it is a character in the movie that is going away, but as if it is someone that you are friends with that is losing their life. And Corman's brave participation in the marketing of this searing classic of modern film should be commended. I hate to end on such a heavy note. I point out that one of the funniest things about the about the coming attractions for John Waters' film The Pink Flamingos, which features testimony from first-time viewers as they leave the theater, is that one very loony person bursts out of the cinema exclaiming, "This is better than Cries and Whispers." Debatable. And I could go on and on. There's certainly any number of remaining flat-out classics of international cinema which Corman helped propagate. But right at the end here, I wanted to mention a few that are probably a little bit closer to his normal sort of more exploitative aesthetic, at least peripherally, but are still films that I feel are of exceptional notability. And these would be Christian F., also New World, Andy Warhol's Bad, which is one of the most hard-hitting of his offerings. David Cronenberg's The Brood, also the top-notch Who documentary, The Kids Are All Right. And after Corman sold New World Pictures, their forays into art house dwindled considerably, more or less concluding around the time of Ken Russell's Crimes of Passion. So yeah, even as his final decades of work settled into a more relaxed, kind of throwback to his mass-produced pace of 50s exploitation schlock. It is not only through his apprenticeship of future cinema icons that Roger Corman's legacy as a supporter of great filmmakers, but also as simply a great filmmaker is assured. Hey, this is Tom with Buncombe Shinola. Thanks for listening to my ravings about Roger Corman. Hope you enjoyed them. Wanted to point out that quite a few of the other videos we have on my channel deal with Roger Corman productions. Some of them I mentioned in the text previously, but I will compile them into a playlist that you can click on in the description below. Check them all out. There's one about Rock and Roll High School. There's one that mentions The Trip with Angelo Rizzuto, and there's one that mentions one of those juvenile delinquent crime dramas, which I barely touched upon, that surprisingly a member of John Coltrane's quintet appears in. Definitely check them all out. Well, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you again soon.